You always want to make accurate measurements, reducing any errors and uncertainties to a reasonable degree. When measuring any length, the ruler should be as close to the object as possible to avoid parallax error. You want your eye to be in line with the point on the ruler too, for the same reason. Parallax error is a random error. It won't be the same every time. If it's not possible to have them close together, say when measuring the extension of a spring, you can use set squares, just a right-angled triangle, even made out of a piece of card, to accurately show where it lies upon the ruler. It's also a good idea to use one between the ruler and the flat surface it's on, say the table, to ensure that the ruler is indeed vertical. The resolution of a ruler or a meter rule is usually 1 millimeter. That's the smallest difference it can measure. There can be a large random error when using a stopwatch due to reaction time. To mitigate this, you should always do repeats and calculate a mean. This is also true when taking measurements, say with a Vernier caliper or micrometer, for example, when you're finding the thickness of the wire in the Young modulus or resistivity experiments. Digital instruments will give you a value on the screen. All you have to do is take the reading, like a digital voltmeter. However, sometimes it's more useful to use an analog instrument. In this case, your eye must be in line with the needle to avoid parallax error. Sometimes they have a mirror behind to help you with this. You might have to choose one that has an appropriate full-scale deflection for your measurements. That is, the maximum measurement it can make. This is usually 1, 2, 5, 10, 50, 100, etc. Let's say we find out the maximum voltage we're going to have to read in an experiment is 6 volts. The appropriate full-scale deflection would be 10 volts in this case. 1 volt would be too small, and 100 volts would result in inaccurate readings because the resolution would be too large and the uncertainty would be massive. A micrometer has a much higher, or I prefer saying smaller, resolution, usually 0.01 millimeter, that's 1/100th of a mil. Firstly, it's a good idea to calibrate it. Close the jaws with nothing between using the ratchet on the end. This ensures you don't over-tighten them, which would result in the jaws being compressed, giving the wrong measurement. If it says 0.00 millimeters at this point, it's all good. If not, there is a zero error, a systematic error. Systematic means it will be the same error every time. To mitigate this, just subtract the error from every measurement. A Vernier caliper also has 2 scales. The 0 on the slide tells you how many millimeters, then the Vernier scale gives you the tenths, or sometimes 20ths, that's 0.05 millimeters, you have on top of that. A Vernier scale works because its lines are spaced such that they don't line up with the main scale. However, one of these lines will line up with the main scale. That's what you take as your 1/10 of a millimeter. So this would be 8.7 millimeters. It can also be used to measure the depth of a hollow object, say a tube, using the rod that comes out of the other end that goes into the tube and the edge of the caliper rests on the top. Then you just read it as normal. Uncertainty is the idea that even if you avoid parallax error, zero error, etc., no measurement will ever be completely accurate because there's always a bit of rounding involved in every one you make. For example, using a thermometer with a 1 degree Celsius resolution will require you to decide if the liquid is closer to, say, 27 or 28 degrees. In chemistry, say, you'll likely say that this temperature therefore is 27 plus or minus 0.5 degrees. Now, you will likely get the mark if you say that in a physics exam as well, but many argue, including myself, that there's every possibility that you might think the liquid is closer to 27 when it's actually closer to 28. That means the true value is not within your uncertainty. That's why most questions expect you to state the uncertainty as being equal to the resolution itself. So this would be 27 plus or minus 1 degree C. The uncertainty of a digital instrument can be inferred to be just one of the last digit, or it can just be half of that, which is a little bit more appropriate than if we're actually doing a measurement with a ruler or thermometer. That involves a judgment call. Finding the uncertainty in a mean value, all we do is find the range of the values, then half it. That's the maximum, take away the minimum, by the way, not the first, take away the last. Drawing a line of best fit on a graph allows you to find a gradient. However, sometimes the points will have error bars to reflect the uncertainty. If that's the case, you can also draw a line of worst fit too. This is a line that has the maximum or minimum possible gradient while still crossing through every single bar. Note that means it might not hit the ends of the first and last error bar, but that's okay. We then find the difference between the gradient of the line of worst fit and the line of best fit to find the uncertainty. Alternatively, you could just draw the 2 lines of worst fit and find the mean of the 2 to get the gradient, and the uncertainty will be half their range like any other mean. If you add or subtract 2 values that have an uncertainty, then the total uncertainty is the sum of the 2 uncertainties. If you're using a ruler that you can move so the zero can be lined up with the edge of whatever you're measuring, the uncertainty will be equal to the resolution. However, if the ruler can't move and you have to find the measurement by finding the difference between 2 points, then the uncertainty will be double the resolution. This is because we've essentially just combined two uncertainties, or rather two absolute uncertainties. Absolute uncertainty is your normal uncertainty. It has a unit, just like the measurement. But what if you're multiplying or dividing values that have uncertainties instead? In this case, you convert the absolute uncertainties into percentage uncertainties, and then you add them all up regardless of whether it's being multiplied or divided. So let's say we have these measurements, which we put into an equation to calculate an answer. Here are the uncertainties in percentage form as well, and I've added them up to give the total percentage uncertainty. Uncertainties always increase, by the way, regardless of whether you're adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing. Once you have the total percentage uncertainty, you need to turn this back into an absolute uncertainty for the final calculated value. Just multiply it by the percentage uncertainty as a decimal, and boom, you're done. We usually try to obtain a straight line graph in physics experiments, which allows us to find a gradient and therefore the relationship between the two variables on the axes. Variables aren't always directly proportional though, of course, but if we know the relationship, we can plot the right things on the axis so we do get a straight line. For example, with the stationary wave on a string experiment, we know that the frequency is proportional to the square root of the tension, or f squared is proportional to t. So if we plot f squared on the y-axis, t on the x-axis, we'll get a straight line. If we have some sort of inverse proportional relationship, then 1 over something must go on one of the axes. Log graphs are powerful because they allow us to find the relationship between two variables if we don't know it. Prime example of this is what Kepler did to coin his third law. He saw that the further away planets were from the Sun, the longer their time period. But he needed to find out exactly how they were related, as t clearly wasn't proportional to r, but r to the power of something instead. If we take the planets in our solar system and plot log t against log r, we get a straight line. It doesn't matter what log base we use, by the way. It works even for natural log, ln. A graph with log values always gives a straight line. The gradient is the important thing here. Usually this is what gives us the relationship. In this case, the gradient is 1.5, or 3 halves. The general straight line formula is y equals mx plus c. In this case, log t equals 3 halves log r, plus some constant, which is our y-intercept. Let's call it log k. From there, we have two log identities we need to use. First, we can take the 3 halves and make it the power on the r. Then we can also say that the sum of two logs is equal to the log of the two things multiplied. So on the right, we have log kr to the power of 3 halves. Delogging both sides, we see that t is proportional to r to the power of 3 over 2, or t squared is proportional to r cubed. Even if logs aren't involved, you still need to be able to interpret a graph in terms of y equals mx plus c to produce an equation. Bear in mind that sometimes it's only one of the axes that will be a log, and just remember if you delog one side, in this case it's 10 to the power of the other side, or it would be e to the power of the other side if it's a natural log. Finally, it's possible you'll be given a graph that has an actual logarithmic scale. It's non-linear. In this case, the first line is one of that order, and the lines then get smaller approaching 9, and then it goes to the next power up. So 10, 20, 30 up to 90, then 100, 200, etc. Reading off these graphs often requires you to make a judgment call with values between the lines, so just remember that going halfway to the next line isn't actually half the difference. It's not 5, but it's more like 3. So I hope you found that helpful. Leave a like and a comment if you did. And don't forget to check out our revision app to help you test your knowledge. And I'll see you next time.